Hello, I'll be starting up from page 10. Oh, it wasn't even page 10, it was page 9. At the top of page 9. That is atrocious. Anyways, I'll take this off just so it's a bit darker so you can sleep a bit easier. Uh, it was chilly that April, with the awkward changeability of English spring. The visitors came up the narrow road through the forest from the south. They filled the spare rooms. They bunked out in cow byres and barns. Oh, it's a fucking semicolon. I'm listening to music while I read, but this music is a bit too loud and noticeable for myself, so I'm gonna switch it up and turn it down. um, some of them raised colored tents, some of them arrived in their own caravans drawn by large gray horses or small shaggy ponies. In the forest there was a carpet of bluebells. On the morning of April the 29th, Dunstan Thorne drew guard duty on the gap in the wall with Tommy Forrester. These names are... Okay. It's weird having read the back and knowing who will be important because I'm looking at it and I'm like, these are not the names of the people. But they're the last names, so when does that happen? They stood on each side of the gap in the wall and they waited. Dunstan had done guard duty many times before, but hitherto his task. I think I've heard that word before. Hitherto. Hitherto. His task had consisted of simply standing and, on occasion, shooing away children. Today he felt important. He held a wooden cudgel, and as each stranger to the village came up to the break in the wall, Dunstan or Tommy would say, "Tomorrow, tomorrow. No one's coming through today, good sirs." And the strangers would retreat a little away and stare through the break in the wall at the unassuming meadow behind it, at the unexceptional trees that dotted the meadow, at the rather dull forest behind it. Some of them attempted to strike up conversations with Dunstan or Tommy, but the young men, proud of their status as guards, declined to converse, contenting themselves by raising their hand, tightening their lips, and generally looking important. At lunchtime, Daisy Hempstock brought by a small pot of shepherd's pie for both of them, and Bridget Comfrey brought them each a mug of spiced ale. Holy shit. And, at twilight, another two able-bodied young men of the village arrived to relieve them, carrying a lantern each, and Tommy and Dunstan walked down to the inn where Mr. Bromios gave them each a mug of his best ale, and his best ale was very fine indeed, as a reward for doing guard duty. There was a buzz of excitement in the inn, now crowded beyond believing. It was filled with visitors to the village from every nation in the world, or so it seemed to Dunstan, who had no sense of distance beyond the woods surrounding the village of Wall. So he regarded the tall gentleman in the black top hat at the table beside him, all the way up from London, with as much awe as he regarded the taller, ebony-colored gentleman in the white one-piece robe with whom he was dining. It's such a long sentence. Dunstan knew that it was rude to stare, and that as a villager of Wall, he had every right to feel superior to all of the foreigners, in quotes. But he could smell unfamiliar spices on the air, and he could hear men and women speaking to each other in 100 tongues, and he gawked and gazed unashamedly. The man walked in the black silk top hat. What? Oh. The man in the black top hat had noticed Dunstan staring at him, and he motioned the lad over to him. Do you like treacle pudding? He asked abruptly, by way of introduction. Mutanabi was called away, and there's more pudding. Here's than a man can manage on his own. Oh, okay, sorry. Let me reread that. Mutanabi was called away, and there's more pudding here than a man can manage on his own. Dunstan nodded. The treacle? Treacle? Treacle. Treacle pudding was steaming invitingly on his plate. Well then, said his new friend, help yourself. He passed Dunstan a clean china bowl and spoon. Dunstan needed no further encouragement, and he began to demolish the pudding. That's such a weird word in this context of the book. To demolish the pudding is so funny. Now, young'un, said the tall gentleman in the black silk top hat to Dunstan, once their bowls and the pudding plate were quite empty. It'd seem the inn has no more rooms, also that every room in the village has been let. Is that so? Said Dunstan, unsurprised. That it is, said the gentleman in the top hat. I like the repetition of top hat, I don't know why. And what I was wondering was, would you know of a house that might have a room? Dunstan shrugged. All the rooms have gone by now, he said. I remember that when I was a boy of... Or no, I think he's still talking. I remember that when I was a boy of 9, my mother and my father sent me to sleep out in the rafters by the cow byre for a week, and lent my room to a lady from the Orient and her family and servants. She left me a kite as a thank you, and I flew it from the meadow until one day it snapped its string and flew away into the sky. Where do you live now? Asked the gentleman in the top hat. I have a cottage on the edge of my father's land, Dunstan replied. It was our shepherd's cottage until he died. 2 years ago, last Lammas-tide, and my parents gave it to me. Take me to it, said the gentleman in the hat, and it did not occur to Dunstan to refuse him. Alright, man. The spring moon was high and bright, and the night was clear. They walked down from the... Okay, so for a moment I was like, I'm recording, right? They walked down from the village to the forest beneath it, and they walked the whole way past the Thorne family farm, where the gentleman in the top hat was startled by a cow sleeping in the meadow, which snorted as it dreamed, until they reached Dunstan's cottage. It had 1 room and a fireplace. The stranger nodded. I like this well enough, he said. Come, Dunstan Thorne. I'll rent this room from you for the next 3 days. What'll you give me for it? A golden sovereign, a silver piece, a copper penny, and a fresh shiny farthing, said the man. Now, a golden sovereign for 2 nights was more than fair rent in the days when a farm worker might hope to make £15 in a good year. Still, Dunstan hesitated. If you're here for the market, he told the tall man, then it's miracles and wonders you'll be trading. The tall man nodded. So, it would be a miracle and wonder that you're after, is it? He looked around Dunstan's 1-room cottage again. It began to rain then, a gentle pattering on the thatch above them. Oh, very well, said the tall gentleman, a trifle testily. A miracle, a wonder. Tomorrow you shall attain your heart's desire. Now, here is your money. And he took it from Dunstan's ear with one easy gesture. Dunstan touched it to the iron nail on the cottage door, checking for fairy gold. Then he bowed low to the gentleman and walked off into the rain. He tied his money up in his handkerchief. Dunstan walked to the cow byre in the pelting rain. He climbed into the hayloft and was soon asleep. He was aware, in the night, of thunder and lightning, although he did not wake. And then in the small hours of morning he was awoken by someone treading awkwardly on his feet. Sorry, said a voice. That is to say, excuse me. Who's that? Who's there? Said Duncan. Just me, said the voice. I'm here for the market. I was sleeping in a hollow tree for the night, but the lightning toppled it, cracked it like an egg. It did, and smashed it like a twig. And the rain got down my neck and threatened to get into my baggage. And there's things in there that must be kept... Oh, I skipped too many pages. Dry as dust. I kept it safe as house... And I'd kept it safe as houses on all my travellings here, though it was wet as... Water, suggested Dunstan. Ever so, continued the voice in the darkness. So I was wondering, it continued, if you don't mind me staying under your roof, as I'm not very big. And I'd not disturb you or nothing. Just, just don't tread on me, said Dunstan. It was then a flash of lightning illuminated the byre, and in the light, Dunstan saw something small and hairy in the corner, wearing a large floppy hat, and then darkness. I hope I'm not disturbing you, said the voice, which certainly sounded rather hairy. Now Dunstan thought about it. You aren't, said Dunstan, who was very tired. That's good, said the hairy voice, because I wouldn't want to disturb you. Please, Dunstan said, just let me sleep, please. There was a snuffling noise, which was replaced by gentle snoring. Dunstan rolled over in the hay. The person, whatever it was, farted, scratched itself, and began to snore once more. Dunstan listened to the rain on the byre roof, and thought about Daisy Hemstock. And in his thought, notification on my phone. Whoa, blah blah blah. Anyways, sorry. Dunstan listened to the rain and on the byre roof, and thought about Daisy Hemstock. And in his thoughts, they were walking together, and 6 steps behind them walked a tall man with a top hat and a small, furry creature whose face Dunstan could not see. They were off to see his heart's desire. There was bright sunlight on his face, and the cow byre was empty. He washed his face and walked up to the farmhouse. He put on his very best jacket, and his very best shirt, and his very best breeches. He scraped the mud from his boots with his pocket knife. Then he walked into the farm kitchen and kissed his mother on the cheek, and helped himself to a cottage loaf and a large pat of fresh churned butter. And then, with his money tied up in his fine Sunday cambric handkerchief, he walked up to the village of Wall and bade good morning to the guards on gate. Through the gap in the wall he could see colored tents being raised, stalls being erected, colored flags, and people walking back and forth. We're not to let anyone through until midday, said the guard. Dunstan shrugged and went to the pub, where he pondered what he could buy with his savings, the shiny half-crown he had saved, and the lucky 6 pence, with a hole drilled through it, on a leather thong around his neck. And with that additional pocket handkerchief filled with coins, he had, for the moment, quite forgotten there had been anything else promised the night before. At the stroke of midday, Dunstan strode to the wall, and nervously, as if he were breaking the greatest of taboos, he walked through beside, as he realized, the gentleman in the black silk top, who nodded to him. These fucking sentences are so long, it pisses me off a little bit. Like, just a little bit, you know? Not enough to where I'm like, man, I hate this. Like, this is stupid. But just enough to where I'm reading it, I'm like, is this gonna end at some point? Is this sentence gonna end? Am I gonna breathe or am I gonna die while reading this? Ah, my landlord. And how are you today, sir? Very well, said Dunstan. Oh, I forgot I was doing a voice. Walk with me, said the man. Let us walk together. They walked across the meadow towards the tents. Have you been here before? Asked the tall man. I went to the last market 9 years ago. I was only a boy, admitted Dunstan. Well, said his tenant, remember to be polite and take no gifts. Remember that you're a guest. And now I shall give you the last part of the rent I owe you, for I swore an oath, and my gifts last a long time. You and your firstborn child and his or her firstborn child, it's a gift that will last as long as I live. And what would that be, sir? Your heart's desire, remember? Said the gentleman in the top hat. Your heart's desire. Dunstan bowed and walked on towards the fair. Eyes! Eyes! New eyes for old! Shouted a tiny woman in front of a table covered with bottles and jars filled with eyes of every kind and color. Instruments of music from 100 lands, penny whistles to penny hums, 3-penny choral anthems. Try your luck, step right up, answer a simple riddle, and win a windflower. Everlasting lavender, bluebell cloth, bottled dreams, a shilling a bottle. Coats of night, coats of twilight, coats of dusk. Swords of fortune, wands of power, rings of eternity, cards of grace, roll up, step this way. Salves and ointments, philtres and nostrums. Dunstan paused in front of the stall covered with tiny crystal ornaments. He examined the miniature animals, pondering getting one for Daisy Hemstock. He picked up a crystal cat, no bigger than his thumb. Sagely, it blinked at him, and he dropped it, shocked. It righted itself midair, like a real cat, fell on its forepaws. Then it stalked over to the corner of the stall and began to wash itself. Dunstan walked on, through the thronged market. It was bustling with people. All the strangers who had come to Wall in previous weeks were there, and many of the inhabitants of the town of Wall as well. Mr. Bromios had set up a wine tent, and was selling wines and pasties to the village folk, who were often tempted by the foods being sold by the folk from beyond the Wall, but had been told by their grandparents, who had got it from their grandparents, that it was deeply, utterly wrong to eat fairy food, to eat fairy fruit, to drink fairy water, and sip fairy wine. For every 9 years, the folk from beyond the Wall and over the hill set up their stalls, and for a day and a night the meadow played host to the fairy market. And there was, for one day, and one night in 9 years, commerce between the nations. There were wonders for sale, and marvels and miracles. There were things undreamed of, and objects unimagined. What need, Dunstan wondered, could someone have of the storm-filled eggshells? He jingled his money in his pocket handkerchief, and looked for something small and inexpensive with which to amuse Daisy. He heard a gentle chiming in the air above the hubbub of the market, and this he walked toward. He passed a stall in which 5 huge men were dancing to the music of the lugubrious. Lugubrious. Lugubrious? Lugubrious? I don't know. Lugubrious hurdy-gurdy being played by a mournful-looking black bear. He passed a stall where a balding man in a brightly colored kimono was smashing china plates and tossing them into a burning bowl from which a colored smoke was pouring, all the while calling out to passers-by. The chinkling chiming grew louder. Reaching the stall from the sound was emanating, he saw that it was deserted. It was festooned with flowers, bluebells and foxgloves and harebells and daffodils, but also with violets and lilies, with tiny crimson dog roses, pale snowdrops, blue forget-me-nots, and a profusion of other flowers Dunstan could not name. Each flower made of glass or crystal, spun or carved, he could not tell. They counterfeited life perfectly, and they chimed and jingled like distant glass bells. "Hello?" called Dunstan. "Good morrow to you on this market day," said the stall-holder, clambering down from the painted caravan parked behind the stall, and she... Oh, it's a woman, okay. And she smiled at him with white teeth and a dusky face. She was one of the folk from beyond the Wall. He could tell at once from her eyes and her ears, which were visible behind her curly black hair. Her eyes were a deep violet, while her ears were ears of a cat, perhaps gently curved, and dusted with a fine, dark fur. She was quite beautiful. Dunstan picked up a flower from the stall. "It's very lovely," he said. It was a violet, and it chinkled and sang as he held it, making a noise similar to that produced by wetting a finger and rubbing it gently around a wine glass. "How much is it?" She shrugged. It was a delightful shrug it was. A delightful shrug it was. "The cost is never discussed at the outset," she told him. "It might be a great deal more than you're prepared to pay." "And then would you leave?" "And we would both be poorer for it." And then you would leave, and we would both be poorer for it. "Let us discuss the merchandise in a more general way." Dunstan paused. It was then that the gentleman with the black silk top hat passed by the stall. "There," murmured Dunstan's lodger. "My debt to you is settled, and my rent is paid in full." Dunstan shook his head, as if to clear it of a dream, and turned back to the young lady. "So, where do these flowers come from?" he asked. She smiled knowingly. "On the side of Mount Calamon. Calamon. A grove of oh my lord. On the side of Mount Calamon, a grove of glass flowers grows. The journey there is perilous. The journey back is more so. And of what purpose are they? Asked Dunstan. The use and function of these flowers is chiefly decorative and recreational. They bring pleasure. They can be given to a loved one as a token of admiration and affection, and the sound they make is pleasing to the ear. Also, they catch the light most delightfully. She held a bluebell up to the light, and Dunstan could not but observe that the color of the sunlight glittering through the purple crystal was inferior in both hue and shade to that of her eyes. I see, said Dunstan. They are also used in certain spells and cantrips. If Sir is a magician? Dunstan shook his head. There was, he noticed, something remarkable about the young lady. Ah, even so, they are delightful things, she said, and smiled again. The remarkable thing was a thin silver chain that ran from the lady's wrist down to her ankle and into the painted caravan behind her. Dunstan remarked upon it. The chain? It binds me to the stall. I am the personal slave of the witch woman who owns the stall. She caught me many years ago, as I played by the waterfalls in my father's land. High in the mountains, luring me on and on in the form of a pretty frog, but a moment out of my reach, until I had left my father's land, unwittingly, whereupon she resumed her true shape and popped me into a sack. And are you her slave forever? Not forever. And at that the fairy girl smiled. I gain my freedom the day the moon loses her daughter. If that occurs in a week, when 2 Mondays come together, I await it. Sorry, I was reading it because that's a period, but it didn't feel like it. I await it with patience, and in the meantime, I do as I am bid, and also I dream. Will you buy a flower from me now, young master? My name is Dunstan. And an honest name it is, too, she said with a teasing grin. Where are your pincers, Master Dunstan? Will you catch the devil by the nose? And what is your name? Asked Dunstan, blushing a deep red. I no longer have a name. I am a slave, and the name I had is taken from me. I answer to hey you, or girl, or foolish slattern, or many another imprecation. Dunstan noticed how the silken fabric of her robe pressed itself against her body. He was aware of elegant curves and of her violet eyes upon him, and he swallowed. Dunstan put his hand in his pocket and pulled out his kerchief. He could no longer look at the woman. He tumbled out his money onto the counter. Take enough for this, he said, picking a pure white snowdrop from the stall. We do not take money at this stall. She pushed the coins back towards him. No? What will you take? For by now he was quite agitated, and his only mission was to obtain a flower for Daisy Hemstock. To obtain his flower and to depart, for truth to tell, the young lady was making him exceedingly uncomfortable. I could take the color of your hair, she said, or all the memories before you were 3 years of age. I could take the hearing from your left ear, not all of it, just enough that you'd not enjoy music or appreciate the running of river or the soughing of the winds. Dunstan shook his head. Or a kiss from you. One kiss. Here on my cheek. That I'll pay with goodwill, said Dunstan, and with that he leaned across the stall amid the twinkling jingling of the crystal flowers and planted a chaste kiss on her soft cheek. He smelled the scent of her. Intoxicating. Magical. It filled the front of his head and chest and his mind. There now, she said, and she passed him the snowdrop. He took it with his hands that suddenly seemed to him to be huge and clumsy and not at all small, and in every way perfect like the hands of the fairy girl. And I'll see you back here tonight, Dunstan Thorne. when the moon goes down. Come here and hoot like a little owl. Can you do that? He nodded and stumbled away from her. He did not need to ask how she knew his surname. She had taken it from him, along with certain other things, such as his heart, when he had kissed her. The snowdrop chimed in his hands. "Why, Dunstan Thorne," said Daisy Hemstock, when he encountered her by Mr. Bromios's tent, sitting with her family and Dunstan's parents, eating brown sausages and drinking porter. "Whatever is the matter?" "I bought you a gift," Dunstan muttered, and thrust the chiming snowdrop towards her. It glinted in the afternoon sunlight. She took it from him, puzzled, with his fingers still shiny from sausage grease. Impulsively, Dunstan leaned forward and, in front of her mother and father and sister, in front of Bridget Comfrey and Mr. Bromios and all, he kissed her on her fair cheek. The outcry was predictable, but Mr. Hemstock, who had not lived on the border of Fairy and the lands beyond for 57 years for nothing, exclaimed, "Hush now! Look at his eyes! Can't you see the poor boy's dazed in his wits? Dazed and confused? He's bespelled! I'll wager you. Hoy, Tommy Forster, come here. Take young Dunstan Thorne back to the village and keep an eye on him. Let him sleep if he wishes, or talk if it's talk he needs." Tommy walked Dunstan out of the market and back to the village of Wall. Sorry, I was checking how long it is. "There now, Daisy," said her mother, stroking her hair. "He's just a little elf-touched, that's all. No need to take on so." She pulled a lace kerchief from her capacious bosom. Alright. I'm a fucking toddler. And she pulled a lace kerchief from her capacious bosom and dabbed at her daughter's cheek, which had suddenly become covered with tears. Daisy looked up at her and seized the handkerchief, and sorry, that was a weird dash where it's hand dash next line kerchief, and blew her nose upon it and sniffled into it. And Mrs. Hemstock observed, with a certain complexity, that Daisy appeared to be smiling through her tears. "But, Mother, Dunstan kissed me," said Daisy Hemstock, and she fixed the crystal snowdrop at the front of her bonnet, where it chimed and glistened. "Oh, that's cute. I hope, assuming he doesn't get his shit stolen by that witch, I hope that he can find her. This is my prediction based on the text. I hope that he can find her in the future because of the sound that it makes on her bonnet." After some time spent searching for it, Mrs. Hemstock and Dunstan's father found the stall where the crystal flowers were being sold. But the stall was being run by an elderly woman, accompanied by an exotic and very beautiful bird. Oh, is the girl the bird now? That'd be funny. Which was chained to its perch by a thin silver chain. Yeah, okay. Not even a prediction at that point if they spell it out that much. There was no reasoning with the old woman, for when they tried to question her about what had happened to Dunstan, all her talk was one of the prizes of her collection, given away by a good-for-nothing, and that was what came of ingratitude, and of these sad modern times, and of today's servants. In the empty village, for who'd be in the village during the fairy market, Dunstan had taken into the seventh magpie and given a wooden settle on which to visit. I actually don't know what that sentence, what? And given a wooden settle on which to sit. I guess a wooden settle is I guess a settle is something. And it's wooden, obviously, so okay, whatever. He rested his forehead on his hands and stared off into no one knows where, and from time to time sighed, huge sighs, like the wind. Yeah, you know something about huge sighs. Tommy Forrester tried to talk to him, saying, "Now then, old fellow, buck up. That's the ticket. Let's see a smile, eh? How's about a drink to eat? Or something to eat, then? Or something to drink? No? My word, you do look queer, Dunstan, old fella." But gaining no response of any kind, Tommy began to pine after the market himself, for even now, he rubbed his tender jaw, the lovely Bridget was undoubtedly being escorted by some huge and imposing gentleman with exotic clothes and a little monkey that chattered. And having assured himself that his friend would be safe in the empty inn, Tommy walked back through the village to the gap in the wall. As Tommy re-entered the market, he observed the place that was a hubbub, a wild place of puppet shows, of jugglers, and dancing animals, of horses for auction, and all kinds of things for sale or barter. Later, at twilight, a different kind of people came out. Every once in a while I check my recording software to see if it's good, and yeah, we're good. Later, at twilight, a different kind of people came out. There was a crier who cried news as a modern newspaper printed headlines. The master of Stormhold suffers a mysterious malady. The hill of fire has moved to the fastness of Dean. The squire of Garamon's only heir is transformed into a grunting pig-wiggin. And would for a coin expand further on these stories. It's like a radio. The sun set, and a huge spring moon appeared, high in the already in the heavens. A chill breeze blew. Now, the traders retreated into their tents, and the visitors to the market found themselves whispered at, invited to partake in numerous wonders, each available for a price. And as the moon came low on the horizon, Dunstan Thorne walked quietly down the cobbled streets of the village of Wall. He passed many a merrymaker, visitor or foreigner, although few enough of them observed him as he walked. He slipped through the gap in the wall. Thick it was, the wall, and Dunstan found himself wondering, as his father had before him, what would happen were he to walk along top of it. Through the gap into the meadow, and for that night, for the first time in his life, Dunstan entertained thoughts of continuing on through the meadow, of crossing the stream and vanishing into the trees on its far side. He entertained these thoughts awkwardly, as a man entertains unexpected guests. Then he reached his objective. He pushed these thoughts away, as a man apologizes to his guests and leaves them, muttering about some prior engagement. The moon was setting. Dunstan raised his hands to his mouth and hooted. There was no response. The sky above was a deep color, blue perhaps, or purple, not black, sprinkled with more stars than the mind could hold. He hooted once more. That, she said severely in his ear, I've never heard severely used like that, is nothing like an owl. A snowy owl it could be, a barn owl even. If my ears were stopped with twigs, perhaps I'd imagine it an eagle owl, but it's not a little owl. Dunstan shrugged and grinned, a little foolishly. The fairy woman sat beside him. She intoxicated him. He was breathing her, sensing her through the pores of his skin. She leaned close to him. Do you think you're under a spell, pretty Dunstan? I do not know. She laughed, and the sound was a clear rill bubbling over rocks and stones. You are under no spell, pretty boy, pretty boy. She lay back in the grass and stared up at the sky. Your stars, she asked. What are they like? Dunstan lay beside her in the cool grass and stared up at the night sky. There was certainly something odd about the stars. Perhaps there were more color in them, for they glittered like tiny gems. Perhaps there was something about the number of tiny stars, the constellations. Something was strange and wonderful about the stars. But then, they lay back to back, staring up at the sky. What do you want from life? Asked the fairy lass. I don't know, he admitted. I think... Oh, no, that's it. I don't know, he admitted. I think. I want my freedom. she said. Dunstan reached down to the silver chain that ran from her wrist to her ankle, and off away in the grass. He tugged on it. It was stronger than it looked. It was fashioned of cat's breath and fish scales and moonlight mixed in with the silver, she told him, unbreakable until the terms of the spell are concluded. Oh. He moved back onto the grass. I should not mind it, for it is a long chain. I should not mind it, for it is a long, long chain. But the knowledge of it irks me. I miss my father's land, and the witch woman is not the best of mistresses. And she was quiet. Dunstan leaned toward her, reaching a hand up to her face, felt something wet and hot splash against his hand. Why? You were crying. She said nothing. Dunstan pulled her toward him, wiping ineffectually at her face with his big hand, and then he leaned into her sobbing face, and tentatively, uncertain of whether or not he was doing the correct thing given the circumstances, he kissed her, full upon her burning lips. There was a moment of hesitation, and then her mouth opened against his, and her tongue slid into his mouth, and he was, under the strange stars, utterly, irrevocably lost. He'd kissed girls before, with the girls of the village, but he had gone no further. His hand felt small. Oh my god, my brain. His hand felt her small breasts through the silk of her dress. That touched the hard nubs of her nipples. I wonder how well this is gonna upload to YouTube. She clung to him, hard, as if she were drowning, fumbling with his shirt, with his breeches. She was so small. He was scared he would hurt her and break her. He did not. She wriggled and writhed beneath him, gasping and kicking and guiding him with her hand. She placed 100 burning kisses on his face and chest, and then she was above him, straddling him, gasping and laughing, sweating and slippery as a minnow, and he was arching and pushing and exulting, his head full of her and only her, and had he known her name he would have called it out loud. At the end, he would have pulled out, but she held him inside her, wrapped her legs around him, pushed against him so hard that he felt the two of them occupied the same place in the universe, as if, for one powerful, engulfing moment, they were the same person, giving and receiving as the stars faded into the pre-dawn sky. They lay together, side by side. The fairy woman adjusted her silk robe and was once more decorously covered. Dunstan pulled his breeches back up with regret. He squeezed her small hand in his. The sweat dried on his skin, and he felt chilled and lonely. He could see her now, as the sky lightened into a dawning gray. Around them animals were stirring, horses stamped, birds began waking to sing the dawn in, and here and there across the market meadow, those in the tents were beginning to rise and move. "Now get along, you," she said softly, and looked at him, half regretfully, with eyes as violet as the cirrus clouds, high in the dawn sky, and she kissed him, gently, on the mouth, with lips that tasted of crushed blackberries. Then she stood up and walked back to the gypsy caravan behind the stall. Dazed and alone, Dunstan walked through the market, feeling a great deal older than his 18 years. Whoops. He returned to the cow byre, took off his boots, and slept until he woke, when the sun was high in the sky. On the following day, the market finished, although Dunstan did not return to it, and the foreigners left the village, and life in Wall returned to normal, which was perhaps slightly less normal than life in most villages, particularly when the wind was in the wrong direction, but was, all things considered, normal enough. 2 weeks after the market, Tommy Forrester proposed marriage to Bridget Comfrey, and she accepted. And the week after that, Mr. Hemstock came to visit Mrs. Thorne of, what? And the week after that, Mrs. Hemstock came to visit Mrs. Thorne of a morning. Okay. They took tea at the parlor. It is a blessing about the Forrester boy, said Mrs. Hemstock. I'm worried I'm holding your book weird, and it's gonna make the front pages open weird. That it is, said Mrs. Thorne. Jesus Christ. Have another scone, my dear. I expect your Daisy shall be a bridesmaid. I trust she shall, said Mrs. Hemstock, if she should live so long. Mrs. Thorne looked up, alarmed. Why? Is she is not ill, Mrs. Hemstock. Say it is not so. She does not eat, Mrs. Thorne. She wastes away. She drinks little water from time to time. Oh my, Mrs. Hemstock went on. Last night I finally discovered the cause. It is your Dunstan. Dunstan? He has not. She raised one hand to her mouth. Oh no, Mrs. Hemstock said, hastily shaking her head and pursing her lips. Nothing like that. He has ignored her. She has not seen him for days and days. She's taken it into her head that he no longer cares for her. And all she does is hold the snowdrop he gave her, and she sobs. Mrs. Thorne measured out more tea from the jar into the pot, added hot water. Truth to tell, she admitted, we're a little concerned about Dunstan. Thorny and me. He's been mooning. That's the only word for it. His work isn't getting done. Thorny was saying he needs some settling down, that boy. If he'd but settle down, why, Thorny said he'd settle it all in the westward meadows on the lad. Oh, he'd settle all the westward meadows on the lad. Mrs. Hemstock nodded slowly. Hemstock would certainly not be advised to seeing our Daisy happy. Certain he'd settle a flock of our sheep on the girl. The Hemstock's sheep were notoriously the finest for miles around, shaggy-coated and intelligent for sheep, with curling horns and sharp hooves. Mrs. Hemstock and Mrs. Thorne sipped their tea, and so it was settled. Dunstan Thorne was married in June to Daisy Hemstock, and if the groom seemed a little distracted, well, the bride was glowing and lovely as any bride ever been seen. Behind them, their fathers discussed the plans for the farmhouse they would build for the newlyweds in the western meadow. Their mothers agreed how lovely Daisy looked, and what a pity it was that Dunstan had stopped Daisy from wearing the snowdrop he had bought for her at the market at the end of April in her wedding dress. And it is there we will leave them, in a falling flurry of rose petals, scarlet and yellow, and pink and white, or almost. They lived in Dunstan Cottage, where their little farmhouse was erected, and they were certainly happy enough. And the day-to-day business of raising sheep, and herding sheep, and shearing them, and nursing them, slowly took the faraway look from Dunstan's eyes. Autumn came, then winter. It was at the end of February in lamb season, when the world was cold, and a bitter wind howled the moors, and through the leafless forest, when icy rains fell from the leaden skies in continual drizzling showers. Sorry, these are all words I'm never expecting. At 6 p.m, after the sun had set and the sky was dark, that a wicker basket was pushed through the space in the wall. The guards on each side of the gap at first did not notice the basket. They were facing the wrong way, after all, and it was dark and wet, and they were busy stamping the ground and staring gloomily and longingly at the lights of the village. And then a high, keening wail began. It was then they looked down and saw a basket at their feet. There was a bundle in the basket, a bundle of oiled silk and woolen blankets, from the top of which protruded a red, bawling face, with screwed-up little eyes, a mouth, open, vocal, and hungry. And there was, attached to the baby's blanket, with a silver pin, a scrap of parchment, upon which was written in an elegant, if slightly archaic handwriting, the following words: Tristan Thorn. Well, that is chapter 1. Yeah, that's, I don't know. I wish I didn't stutter so much, but I definitely think I'm getting a little better at it now that I'm reading it more and finding my flow a little better. So, chapter 2 starts on page 35, and I just wonder where the next one would be. Would it be around 60? Yeah. The next chapter is done by 56, so that's a solid 20 pages. I think 20 pages would definitely bring us past an hour. We are a sizable chunk into the book, though. We're 30 pages in. It's about a 260. Sheesh. I guess we're not that far, but it looks it because of your bookmark. Yeah, that was nice. It's a nice chapter. I don't know how well that'll upload to YouTube. Might have to make it not public, unfortunately. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, I guess we'll call it.